Good afternoon, everyone. Françoise Bergan, Councilmember Ward 6, and this is the Transportation, Airport, and Public Works meeting. So we start basically with the approval of the June 26 minutes. Councilmember Lawson?
I approve.
Okay, I do too. All right, and then we do not have any consent items. So our first item is the traffic control review by Carly. I think Carly.
Yes. Yes. Thank you, Councilmember Bergan. Dan and I will be presenting today. Dan is in my group. So I am Carly Campuzano, Traffic Manager in the Public Works Department. And Dan, why don't you introduce yourself while I try to share screens on my end? I think you're muted, Dan.
Okay, I'm sorry. My name is Dan Clark, and I'm the Traffic Engineer Technician Supervisor for Public Works, and I work with Carly.
Dan. Okay, we'll go ahead and get started. Dan and I are both going to be presenting on this item today. This item is related to temporary traffic control plans, and we're going to go over the approval and review process today. This presentation is going to be about 20 minutes long. I'll start it off and then Dan will present some as well. So here's the agenda. This gives you an overview of what we're going to cover today. We have not presented this topic at TAPS before, so we decided to go a little bit more in depth on some of the details, but we'll definitely be available at the end if you have any questions as well. So today we'll be covering the temporary traffic control overview, so we'll explain what those are and what our process is. We'll also go over the different types of work zones. So we have low impact and high impact are the primary types that we'll be going over today. And then we'll also be going over our occupancy fees, which is how we assess fees to charge for work that is done within the city right of way. And then we'll touch on the approval process as well as the notification process. And we'll go over some proposed improvements that we have planned for these processes based on feedback that we've heard from you all and from residents. So to start off, just wanted to explain a little bit about what temporary traffic control is. So temporary traffic control refers to devices being signs, markings, barricades, things like that, that are needed in areas temporarily. These are typically used in areas that are maybe a road construction zone that need to be changed for that, or if there's maybe an unexpected incident or even another planned event, such as a race, or if there's a barricade that's put out to close a road for a farmer's market, that's temporary traffic control as well. So it is the responsibility of the public agency, meaning us at the City of Aurora, to review and approve the use and placement of temporary traffic control devices. And the goal is to effectively and safely guide road users through these sites. So really, here are the purposes of why we do this and what we look for and the reasons. So what we're really trying to focus on first of all is safety. We need to protect residents, visitors, workers, and property from any work zone hazards. So that is really the primary goal. Another goal with this is overall mobility. So we want to mitigate any impacts to the traveling public as best we can and make it so that they can still move efficiently through the city. And then productivity. We want to balance safety and mobility, but a trade-off is typically productivity of the work zone or of the work that's getting done. And so we want to accommodate the owner, I guess, of the work zone or the developer who wants to get their work zone efficiently in a timely manner. Just noting, on any single day, Aurora has nearly 100 active work zones in the city. So just defining some of the work zones and terms that we're going to be using today, we typically classify a work zone as either low impact or high impact. High impact work zones, sometimes we abbreviate to HIWAs. We like using a lot of acronyms in public works. So you'll see probably a few more acronyms today. Low impact work zones typically have a short duration, low overall disruption to traffic, and also relatively simple, closures and devices and plans. So those are low impact. The majority of the plans that are submitted to the city for approval are low impact. And those might, primarily go unnoticed by a lot of people traveling through the city. Then we also have high impact work zones, and a lot of our presentation today focuses specifically on high impact work zones. A high impact is a reduction in lane capacity that's 50% or greater. So if there's a road that has 3 lanes and we're closing 2 of them, that would be a high impact. These also cover any roads that are fully closed and that require either a detour or alternate route. And then there are other kind of special one-off cases that could make a work zone be considered high impact. If there are heavy volumes of multimodal movements in certain areas, or if it's an area that we just know is really sensitive for some reason and might generate a high number of concerns or complaints, we might upgrade that to high impact. Or some other special circumstances, but typically we're calling work zones high impact if there is a reduction of vehicle lane capacity greater than 50% or if a road is closed. So street occupancy fees, you're going to hear us talk about those a bit today as well. These are fees that we charge at the city, and the fee schedule is on the city's website, based on the type of closure. So any work done in the city's right-of-way, typically we assess occupancy fees. And these are charged, we'll go into more detail later, and Dan will show you how we calculate these, but there are metrics we use based on the length, the duration of the closure, and the type of closure. So these are intended to recover some of the costs from the city related to plan review and issuing the permit, as well as it's attempting to quantify the impacts of traffic disruption to the traveling public. And these fees are really a way to encourage entities to minimize their traffic impacts as much as possible, because if they're able to minimize their impacts, then they're able to minimize their occupancy fees that they're charged. So I wanted to highlight here that there are different types of projects that are occurring in the city that all require work zones. And the management of these projects is all very different depending on the ownership. So the projects we have the most control over as far as the schedule and timelines are typically projects that are managed by the city of Aurora. So for example, our streets department is routinely having low impact work zones to do pavement maintenance. The water department frequently has impacts to maintain, water infrastructure. And then our capital improvement projects could have traffic impacts as well. So maybe projects managed by my group to construct a roundabout, or by our transportation projects delivery group. Those projects are managed by the city, and we do have a decent amount of control over monitoring the contractor and their schedule. Then we have projects that are managed by other agencies. So some of the agencies listed here are just the ones we work with most frequently in Aurora. There are others as well, but projects managed by other agencies, while we don't have full control over, other agencies typically hear a lot of feedback from, their own elected bodies and from residents. And we also have good working relationships with them. So we generally have more control over the schedule for those types of projects. And then going down the line, we have projects managed by utility companies. Frequent utility companies that have projects and that require work zones are Excel for power and gas, and then telecoms are another frequent dry utility that has a lot of work zones in the city, and there are others as well. So we do have some agreements with these folks about road closures and things like that, but we're generally in less control over their overall schedules. And then we have developer managed projects. So in Aurora, developers are typically required to build public improvements along their frontage or to tie in to the utilities they need access to. And just with the nature of the type of work they're doing, a lot of these are typically high impact closures or projects. And when projects are managed by developers, we just at the city, we typically have very little control over how their project is managed and their overall schedule. So this is a flow chart of our review process. It is a little complicated to read through, so I'm going to attempt to use a laser pointer, which I've never done before, so forgive me if I mess something up. Okay, I think that worked. So we developed this flow chart to show you sort of how the process works from the perspective of our traffic engineering group. But I do want to highlight here that there are a lot of other groups at the city who are involved in different aspects of roadwork approvals, project acceptance, and things like that. Our group on traffic engineering is in charge of reviewing traffic control plans, approving them, and charging fees. So I'll just walk you through kind of the process for low impact work zones and high impact work zones. So first, to start off this process, a contractor will come to the city and they will apply for a public improvements permit. When they apply for this permit, they have to state whether or not they have work that's happening within the public right of way. If they don't, then there's nothing that we need to do on our end. If they do, then you go this way on the flow chart, and then a traffic control plan is required to be submitted with that permit. And then it is assigned to a traffic technician in Dan's group. So once assigned to the technician, they review it. They determine if it is a high impact or low impact. So if it is a low impact, we typically review it for conformance. We provide comments, and then once comments are addressed, so if we have comments, they go back to the contractor, revisions, they resubmit. We kind of go around here in the flow chart. If there are no comments, then we approve the traffic control plan, charge the fees, and issue the permit. If there are high impacts, that is a different, more elaborate process, and Dan will get into more of it later. This is kind of just a little bit of an overview. So if it's high impact, our engineering technician will flag it and they will discuss the details with the contractor. The details we want to know are related to whether or not it really needs to be a high impact and why. If through that process we determine it does need to be a high impact, it goes through a much more extensive and detailed review. We typically try to turn around comments pretty quickly and aim to approve within a 4-week time frame, most of the time faster. If there are comments, you go back around and they resubmit. Once everything is ready to approve, there is other communication and notification protocol that's followed. Once that is all done, then the traffic control plan is approved, fees are charged, and the permit is issued. What I also want to note on this slide is that our public improvements inspectors play a role in the overall process as well. Sometimes if we're not sure in our group if the contractor needs to construct a project in a certain way or if their timelines are reasonable, we work closely with inspections to see what they think since they're knowledgeable about the construction methods and processes. And then once the permit is issued, it's up to the contractor to install all the temporary devices per plan, but our inspectors help to inspect and confirm that it's installed per plan. And then sometimes the inspectors can provide us with feedback on the contractor's progress and help us with communication with the contractor. And they have a lot of other roles as well. This is just kind of how they fit into the overall work zone process. And from there, I'll turn it over to Dan and he'll go over some of these items in a little more detail.
Okay, thank you, Carly. Welcome, everybody. I hope everybody's been staying cool over these last few days. I'm glad that you're asking about our process because there are not a lot of people that understand the work that we do, and there are only a few people that really recognize the results of what we do. So if you don't understand what we're doing, you have a lot of company. We do take pride in our ability to stay under the radar, and that is one of our missions. However, occasionally we do come across some circumstances that prevent our work from staying under the radar, and that's when you hear about it and we hear about it. And that's kind of what I want to address today is how that happens and what we do to minimize those events. Okay, so the traffic engineering review. First of all, our mission really is to keep, or one of our missions is to keep the city out of legal trouble. As Carly explained, we do have a legal responsibility to ensure that any traffic control zone in the city complies with the federal, state, and local regulations. In order to do that, we use the Manual on Uniform Traffic Control Devices that you see here. You may know it as the MUTCD. And then, of course, we also have our own city roadway specifications. So when we first receive a traffic control plan, we just do a fairly quick review, and we see if it meets the specifications outlined here in these two manuals. And we also try to understand what the impact is going to be. As Carly indicated, most of the impacts are very low, and as long as they comply with the specifications and as long as they don't have huge impact, we go ahead and approve those. And we approve about 95% of the time, we approve those within 1 week. If it is a higher impact, then we, can you go back? I'm sorry. Thank you. We really need to understand a lot about the project. In order to determine the impact, we need to understand the location, the start date, how long it's going to be there, and what other things are happening within the impact area of that project. I'm sorry, now you can go.
No worries.
So the high impact review. Again, we make sure that it complies with all of the regulations, and then we go into its impact. And there are two areas of impact that we want to address. One is the scope of the project. And in order to do that, we need to understand exactly what kind of work is being done. We need to review things such as the scope of the work, the methodology. Do they have phases? Have they considered safety issues? Have they considered any potential obstacles, physical obstacles that may be in their way? All these things potentially can cause delays, and we want to make sure that they've considered all these things when they're telling us they want to work from X date to Y date, and that's a reasonable expectation. And so we really, until we receive the application or the proposed traffic control plan, we don't know anything about that project. So we are under the gun to learn as much as we possibly can about what's going on with that project. Another thing that might cause delays is their estimation of their time frame. And that's really critical. So we send out this high impact work zone checklist. And what it does is it asks them to check off that they have pre-planned. And there's a list of things that they need to consider. Do they have their permits? Do they have their approvals? Have they do they have all their equipment and materials scheduled? Those type of things are all important, because if they haven't considered that, we want to make sure that they do. And if an adjustment to their time frame is warranted, we want them to make that adjustment ahead of time.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm sorry?
Oh, sorry.
Question?
I think you're good, Dan.
Okay. All right.
Go to the next one.
So we're trying to get ahead of the game and make sure that they have the proper scope of work as well as the proper time frame involved. Now, construction companies are in their business to make money. So when they put a traffic control plan together, they're going to cater to all of their own interests, which is get it done as fast as possible. They really don't necessarily consider what impact it's going to have on the traveling public. So our goal is to get them to understand that and accommodate the impacts to the traveling public. And because they're in the business of making money, we need to speak that same language. And so we talk about costs. Carly talked about the street occupancy fees as compensation for interrupting traffic. I'm speaking of the other function of the street occupancy fees, which is it costs them money. The more they impact the traveling public and the city, the more money it's going to cost them. And again, to repeat what Carly said, the street occupancy fee is a fee per linear foot multiplied by how long the lane that's being closed is, excuse me, multiplied by the number of lanes that are being closed, multiplied by the duration or the number of days. Detour fees, we want to charge them for detour fees, not just because of the extra wear and tear on the road that's being detoured, but also because if they want to reduce costs, eliminating a detour may be one way of doing it. The detour fee then is it's a set fee of $175 per lane per day. If you look at the example at the bottom here, you can see where those fees add up quite nicely from my perspective. And that gives us some leverage. There are other costs that we want the contractor to be aware of. And if you can go to the next slide, Carly, I'll explain that. So work zones, high impact work zones are described that way because they do impact a lot of things. They have a high impact. So we want to charge that person, or we want to point out that some of those impacts may require them to delay their work. And to a contractor, delays are money. And so we want to point out that one way to reduce the potential of delays is to reduce the impact that they have. So we review the plan, their plan for nearby work zones, for businesses, residents, schools, community events, that type of stuff. And if they want to close a road, but there's a community event scheduled in that area, or as part of their road closure, or even as part of their detour, they may have to delay. So it's an incentive for them to consider reducing their impact. Detours and alternate routes also have high impact. There could be work that's already being done on the road that they want to do to detour people on. If that's the case, they're going to have to wait until that work is completed before they can use that road for a detour. So, and again, delays are money to them. So we want to point all these things out. Once we do point these things out, historically, we get about 150 applications for high impact work zones per year. Once they understand what the cost is, a lot of times they will just automatically reduce their high impact work zone into a low impact work zone. And we're very happy when that happens. All right, so now that we've reviewed the costs with them and the potential delays, we normally have their attention. And once we have their attention, then we can talk about things that may reduce their costs. And sometimes they even ask us, what can we do to reduce our costs? So means the door is open. So some of the things that we consider are they can reduce the number of lanes closed. The graphic there on the right shows you that there are their work is required to close 2 lanes of traffic. Well, we've got 4 lanes. So in this particular case, we can suggest to them that why don't you close 1 lane in one direction, close 1 lane in the other direction, use that additional closed lane in the opposite direction to route traffic through there. That could very well reduce it from a high impact to a low impact, because now you don't have to close 2 lanes going the same direction. You keep traffic flowing. Might be reduced capacity because it's only 1 lane in each direction, but that allows us to avoid potentially a whole detour, as well as the number of lanes that are closed. Another thing we can do is we call it a shoe fly, and that essentially is taking shoulder pavement, maybe adding a little bit of pavement to that, diverting traffic from a potentially closed lane onto the shoulder around the work zone. That again would delay or would prevent a closure and be able to keep lanes open for the traveling public. A couple other things that we can suggest are adjusting the work hours. Maybe they're only planning on working 8 hours a day. Maybe they're only planning on working 12 hours a day. We can suggest, hey, you might want to work 12 hours a day. Sometimes they're open for that, although overtime is very expensive, so that has to be balanced with the cost of the overtime to the cost of the impact. And that's kind of up to them how they balance that. Let's see, what else? We can ask them, well, you're only planning on working 5 days a week. Why don't you work 6? That might reduce the duration of the project. So we suggest things like that. You're not planning on night work. Why don't you plan on doing night work? So this is very important, and they normally respond positively to some of these suggestions. Excuse me. So now we've given them some ammunition. They usually take that, go back, talk to their traffic control provider or their traffic control developer, and ask them to incorporate some of our suggestions into their new plan. And then they resubmit that plan. We take a look at it. They feel that they've balanced their need for productivity with our needs of the traveling public. And that is exactly what we're looking for, is for them to consider with the proper weight the impacts to the traveling public. So once the TCP is approved, traffic control plan, I'm sorry, once the traffic control plan is approved, then we enter that information into the city system. It calculates the occupancy fees. It automatically updates this map that you're looking at there. All of the purple dots are low impact work zones, and the dotted lines are high impact work zones. We put those in manually, but the system will put in the dots for the low impact work zones. The dotted lines, the red indicates the road that is closed. The purple or pink dotted lines indicates it's either a detour or a suggested alternate route around the closure. So the system will also send our permit office a notification that they are ready to send out an invoice. So they send out the invoice, then they monitor when that invoice is paid, the invoice is paid, and then for low impact jobs, they will send out the approved traffic control plan. For high impact work zones, we as the technicians want to have a little bit more control over that, so we don't necessarily send it out right away. There may be different phases. It may be, we may have some doubts that they're going to implement it as we had suggested. So we want control over that. So we send out the approved traffic control plan in as many phases as we think is reasonable. And so when they are partway through phase 1 and they want phase 2, we will not send them phase 2 until they give us a report of the current status of the incompleted phase and assure us that everything is set and ready to go for the following phase. Then we will send that out. And we try not to send out the approved TCP more than about 2 to 3 weeks ahead of when they're planning to work, because in that 2 to 3 weeks, a lot of things can happen that would make the impacts that they have tried to address, there may be more impact. So we try to do that. One of the things that we try to do as technicians for a high impact work zone is we try to be proactive and stay on top of what the status is. We have failed miserably to depend on the contractor to keep us abreast. So we strategically, during certain times during the process, we ask for updates and keep abreast of what's going on, try to get ahead of any potential delays. So then there is also the notification process. And so we try to notify the traveling public. We do that for putting out the variable message signs, which are the electronic signs that you see that indicates usually that there's going to be a closure from this date to that date, and what to do about it. So we want those to get out at least 1 week ahead of time before so to at least communicate with the people that regularly travel those routes. We work with our communications department for the city, and they have a website. We try to give them the information so they can update that website. In addition to the website, they also have a mailing list of people that have signed up to receive notifications of road closures, and they will send those out to the city, to those people. Sometimes other contractors need to be notified that there's going to be another work in the area, just to be aware that they don't inadvertently, close that road or something of that nature. And we also notify the mapping companies. We've developed a way to do that. And that, for instance, would be like Google Maps or even Waze, which I think goes out to several other maps. So that's what happens after we approve the process and certify the traffic control plan. Now, here's the problem: is a lot of these high impact work zones, even though we've tried to make sure that they're ready and they've got their estimate of their duration, that we've got, we feel that that's reasonable. Inevitably, they do run into problems. And when they do, they ask for an extension, and then we have to go through the same process all over again. Some of these high impact work zones, and you're probably aware of some of them, they ask for extensions 2, 3, multiple times. And so we have to go back, and then we have to, if we have approved a work zone in on a road, and we approved it because that road is supposed to be available. It's a detour for a current work zone, but we have allowed somebody to come in after that work zone is supposed to end. It could be days, most likely weeks. And then the contractor that is asking for the extension, we have to then notify that company that that's going to be working on that detour that they're going to have to delay their project. When a contractor asks for an extension, normally they have the road torn up. And so we're almost obligated to approve that extension, of course, after drilling them on what they're going to do about it and how they can still reduce that extension and all those type of things. But inevitably we have to approve it. If we don't, we're just hurting ourselves by having that road torn up for a longer time. So what we have to do is we have to go back to all the things that we've approved since we have approved that project, and go back and try to adjust those. That is where most of our problems exist with work zones working on top of each other, or work zones using the same detour or things of that nature. So that's kind of what we're up against. So I appreciate your time. Now you're not one of those people that doesn't understand what we do. I'll turn it over to Carly.
Thanks, Dan. We've only have a few slides left, so we're almost there. Thanks for hanging in with all of our details. So this slide just shows some performance metric information. The first bullets are just about the number of traffic control plans that we get in our group to review. And I should have mentioned Dan's a supervisor and he has 2 people in his group. So there's 3 people total working on this at the city in our group. So in general, traffic control plans have been increasing. We get over 2,000 of them submitted per year, which is a pretty heavy amount, and we've seen increases basically since 2020. Our goal is to have 95% of them, the reviews, complete within 5 business days, and we've been pretty successful at meeting those goals, though sometimes we do need more time on some of the higher impact work zones that require more coordination. And just as an overall summary, the street occupancy fees we collect, we typically collect between $1 million and $1.7 million per year in occupancy fees. So 2 more slides left. This is about our process improvements that we are planning to carry forward and wanted to bring up for your awareness. So we've received a lot of recent feedback from the community and from council members on some specific high impact work zones that have been impactful for the community. So based on some of our, debriefing on these and some lessons learned, we have a few process improvements that we're planning to move forward and wanted to explain those to you. So first, with our fees, we plan to update our fees to charge extra when the contractors exceed their approved closure time. So in general, about 10% of high impact work zones exceed their planned timelines that we've given them permission for. So that equates to probably 5 or 10 projects per year of high impact work zones that exceed their timelines. And this can be really frustrating, I know, for you all, for the traveling public who thinks a road's going to be reopened and something happens and comes up. So we're proposing to charge contractors double if their approved timeline is exceeded in occupancy fees. Right now we do charge them, but we only charge the same rate that we showed before. And this would allow us to charge, that rate times 2 if the timeline is exceeded. And that will hopefully incentivize them to give us more accurate timelines in the beginning of the process and not be overly optimistic, so that we can communicate that out and have that as an expectation. And we're also proposing to increase fees and charge double for any high impact work zone over 90 days. The majority of high impact work zones that do go longer than their approved timelines are 90-day or more closures. And I think it's just because these tend to be really complex in nature and there's a lot of different things that can go wrong and disrupt the timelines. And so our proposal is also to charge double for high impact work zones that are longer than 90 days to propose this, we did reach out to some other local agencies in the Denver metro area for comparison. So some agencies do charge double for these types of permit violations. One local agency that charges double is Adams County. And there are some other agencies that just charge a set fee for violations for going over timeline. And so the set fee is charged by Denver and Thornton as examples. A few other things we're working on. We're working on updating our permit language to make it more clear to contractors that are applying for the permit that high impact work zones need to be coordinated with us as early as possible to get ahead of some of those coordination items and details that Dan talked about. We're also working with our development services group to try to find a way to expedite the approval process for detour pavement. This could make it more easy and more desirable for contractors to be able to put in detour pavement to reroute traffic instead of fully closing a road or a lane. And then city council notifications. Some specific council members have asked for more information on some work zones and want to be involved ahead of time in the process. So some people have subscribed to our updates to get emailed updates, but we also plan to notify specific council members, ward council members directly if there's a high impact work zone planned that we think will generate some constituent feedback in their wards. And so that is all we had. Thank you so much for listening. I know that was really long and detailed. This is informational only, so we just wanted to provide this information as background, and we're happy to answer any questions that you have.
Okay, thank you very much. Councilmember Lawson, do you have questions?
Yes, I just have a couple, Carly, and thank you so much for and Daniel. So
Can you turn your mic up higher?
Oh, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yeah, now it's better.
Okay, my apologies. Oh, hi, Councilmember Hancock. Sorry, we didn't know you were here. Did you want to speak first or? Okay, just a couple questions I have is where do the impact fees go? So do they go back into what type of fund in your division? Like where do they go when we get these occupational fees? I mean, not occupation. Yeah, occupancy fees. Where do they go back into?
That's a good question. Ellie or Laura can jump in. I think they go into the general fund, but Laura.
They do, that's correct. They go into the general fund.
They go into
They
the
go into
capital
the-
projects fund, actually.
The capital projects fund. So then they could be
Correct.
utilized for any of our additional capital projects that we have for the city,
Yeah, they go into the
or just
General-
transportation oriented.
they go into the general sub fund of capital projects fund. So they're
Uh-huh.
part of the the overall revenue of the capital projects fund that we allocate, in our 5-year plan each year during the budget cycle.
Okay, and then I just have one additional question. Walk me through something, just really a summary. East Bank is coming. There looks like there's going to probably be some road closures. And there's going to be a lot of impact, I think. So with this, do you work with the developer on these possible road closures? And then part B of my question, you're not going to do another project if it's going to interfere, like if you guys do Quincy and then have East Bank coming. I guess I'm just concerned if all of those projects come together, that's going to be a real bad situation in my ward.
Yeah, that's a good question. And Councilmember Lawson, knowing that, I think you brought it up maybe even a year ago when that was all happening. So I actually had Dan in our group has that area flagged for us
Okay.
to look at together when high impact projects come in. But when East Bank comes in, their contractor will apply for a permit and they'll submit whatever they're proposing to do with that.
Okay.
If it's high impact, like we talked about, we would talk to them about what their plan is, what kind of work are they doing, when, what's the duration, how do we message it. Luckily from all the East Bank project stuff, I have a lot of contacts over there in Pierpoint and in the Cherry Creek Racquet Club, I think. So depending on the impact, we might even let extra people know about it.
Okay.
And generally our process is whoever is first in has that work zone. So if East Bank comes in and we don't have anything else planned yet, then they might get approval to close a certain lane. If we know that there are two people who want to be in the same area, we try to have them work together to do the work at the same time. It doesn't always work out, but we try to do that. So with the city's project, we'd probably work with the city project manager and see, like, are you working in this area? When does this impact you? So that's kind of up to us to try to help coordinate when we can. And Parker, Quincy, Smoky, the city project, at least, Dan and I work intimately with that group, so that makes it a little easier. But it'll just depend on how they propose to do the work and what level of impact it is when it comes in, if that makes sense.
I just
Yeah.
wanted to provide that as an example because that's a major thoroughfare and it's going to impact people. It's going to probably go through different neighborhoods. And so I just wanted to provide that as an example of something that it looks like it's connected to this presentation. So
Yeah,
thank you
definitely.
so much.
Yep.
And so I know we have Councilmember Hancock on now. If I might just go ahead and ask my questions. I did get one from Councilmember Sundberg about obviously the Gun Club Road. You've probably heard from him quite a few delays. So he is in favor of some increase. My concern, and I get where we're going on trying to incentivize them to get their work done earlier. And maybe I wasn't paying attention. Is there some sort of leniency, obviously, to get the exact time frame for a major project? It might be a little bit difficult. So let's say they thought it was going to take 30 days and it ends up taking extra 10 days. Are we going to double their fees right away?
We wouldn't double their fees right away. I think we would work with them, probably talk to the inspections group and see what the reasoning is and what happened and is it in their control or not.
Right.
Like, for example, I'll just throw out the gun club example of recently. So their most recent delay is because they had somebody who was injured on site. And if someone's injured on site and that costs them 2 days, I feel like we probably would not say, here's your double fee.
Right. Well, and I
fee.
think the other situation would be utilities possibly interfering. So we're going to penalize her for not getting their work done on time, but they may be impacted by Excel utilities that can't get to them. I mean, we obviously have delays with Excel all the time.
Right.
So that is my concern that if we're going to do this, and I don't know if doubling the fees is right. You said Denver has set fees for delays. I mean, it just seems a bit much to just double fees. I'm sure nobody wants to have longer delays than possible. So I don't know if you can look at some allowances in there for situations and maybe even for allowances like not, you missed by 1 day and you're going to get double fees. And then just, I know we've got the Arapahoe County Fair coming and you saw my email on that. So
Yeah.
Obviously making sure that the signage is out because the neighborhood was concerned that all the traffic, since Harvest is going to be closed, that the traffic is going to go right in the middle of their actual residential neighborhood. So anyway, those are my concerns, is just not making it so onerous when it might be out of a contractor's control, because and especially if it is a developer, I don't know where they add those, if they pass those fees on to consumers or not. And my other point, how do we hold ourselves accountable for the same thing? So when you guys are recommending weekend work and night work and extra hours to reduce the impact on communities, do we also hold ourselves to the same standard? And do we require our employees to work nights, weekends, extra hours?
Yeah, that's a really good question. We do hold ourselves to the same standards. We just have more control on the front end with how the project is bid, because we are putting out the bid package. And so in our documents, we say, these are the expected working hours, this is the expected duration. And if you go over that duration, we also have the ability to charge the contractor damages on our end through our own contracting process. So we don't need to rely on the fees because we have a lot of other mechanisms to use to set those expectations with our contractor. But we absolutely do charge our contractors as well. And about the doubling the fees, so Denver and Thornton, I think were the examples. I believe they charge about 500 extra per day. The fee example we gave was a calculation of about 700 per day. So we were thinking that doubling could really take what their own impacts are and represent that. because if they have a smaller project that has less than $500 a day, they could actually be charged more than double in the fee alternative where you charge a set fee. It could end up being a higher proportion for them. But I think in general, there will be some discretion involved. We try to be fair across
Yeah.
the board with these fees, so it's difficult. But if there is something like an injured employee example, like we probably would not invoice for that. But a utility can be hard because Gun Club the first time around, I think they dug up the road and found all these unknown utilities that should have been known. Like they should have identified those in their design process. So if they are coordinating with Excel and just have to wait on Excel, that's one thing. But if they didn't know about a gas line they should have known was
Right.
there, that's kind of on them as well. So there's a lot of what if scenarios and it's really case by case. Dan has been doing this for more than a decade. I don't know. I won't tell an exact date, Dan. Don't worry. But
So
Dan used
on
to own a
the-
traffic control company too,
so
so
on
he
the-
knows a lot. Yeah.
On the 175 per lane per day, then if they are delayed 10 days, they're going to get per lane per day doubled, right?
Yes. Correct.
Okay. Have you talked to any contractors or developers about this proposal?
We have not talked to them about this proposal. It seemed pretty on par with other local agencies. So yeah, we haven't talked to contractors
I
about
think
it.
the idea is to, for these people who do egregious overruns, I think it's designed to impact them. I think, this is not designed to be draconian. It's supposed to, be a mechanism that gives the city some flexibility on people who are abusing the system. And you know, to your point, Carly, that you're going to use some discretion and good common sense as to how you're going to address these fees with relation to the projects. And also, if someone gets hurt, that's not something you got to do the investigation that's required by OSHA, et cetera, to make sure that's proper. That's not something we're going to charge people for because it delayed the project. That's legitimate. But if somebody has underestimated the timeline that it takes them to complete a project, and sometimes they know.
Yeah.
And to your point, Carly, they didn't do their due diligence and now they're finding things that are wrong. They should pay for that.
I
Because
agree. I guess
people are
agree.
going to be calling you and marching in front of your house, and yelling at you and sending you nasty emails, about why this is delayed. And it's not, it's not your fault. It's somebody who didn't do their due diligence and are not managing the project properly. I think that's the intention of this thing is to make sure that they do that.
I'm not saying that it's wrong. My point is that there are circumstances, and I wanted to make sure that we didn't just automatically double their fees if there are outstanding legitimate circumstances.
Okay. I'm tracking with you. I think we have the Carly, I'm not speaking for you, but I'm just saying I believe that you have the flexibility to be able to do
Well,
that.
I guess that's my question.
Yeah, I think we do. I think we do have the flexibility to do that.
Mhm.
And Dan is really good. Dan works with, Terry and Inspections is on as well. And, they work together to kind of know what happened on delays and if they're reasonable or not. We're trying to address the situations where they knew it would take longer and they told us a fake timeline to get approval, which sometimes happens. Or another example, a contractor, I guess this is Gun Club. I can say this Gun Club a couple years ago when it was closed. The contractor closed the road and discovered things they didn't know about. So they knew they'd be pretty significantly delayed. And so we asked if they could put in detour pavement. And they said that it was cheaper to pay our fees than to find a workaround. And we don't want that to be the case. We want the fees to be enough that they'll try to find a workaround. But it'll be an iterative process. I think we're always willing to look at what we've done and make improvements. And we can definitely see how the first year goes and then see what that helped and come back and see if we need to make changes from there. So.
Yeah. Because then, and as our city grows and we're building and stretching, I think it's important for us to remain nimble, in the transportation way, where how we're building our roads to make sure that it's going to be disruptive on some level, but not to make it so egregious and painful that people are mad. Some people will be mad no matter what. But if contractors and others who are supposed to be doing their due diligence and doing what they're supposed to do, if to your point, Carly, if it's cheaper for them to pay the fee, we don't want it to make it cheaper for them to pay the fee. We want them to get the job done. That's what we want. And so if that incentivizes them to do that, then let's get after that. I'm for that. Any other questions, anybody? Thank you, Councilmember Bergan, for jumping off on me. I apologize for my delay today. So I guess we're going to the intergovernmental agreement. Is that the next thing on the agenda?
Yes.
Yep.
IGA with Arapahoe County and Aurora for the Gun Club Multimodal Improvements Project.
All right, that'll be me. Let me share screen. All right. Can everyone see the presentation? All right, great. So today I'm just coming here before you to talk about the IGA between Arapahoe County and the City of Aurora. This is for the Gun Club Multimodal Improvements Project. And you may recognize this project I presented a couple months ago on this for the CDOT IGAs that we got approved. Oh, and I'm Kathy Valencia, the Transportation Project Delivery Manager. Thank you. Shoot, let's see. 1 second, technical delay. There we go. All right, so this is the project location. This is along Gun Club Road, south of Quincy, and it will connect into the Aurora Parkway. So currently this section of roadway is 2 lanes, and so this project will be creating a 4-lane section that will connect into the 6-lane section on Aurora Parkway. Scope includes 100% design, the National Environmental Policy Act clearance and evaluation. It'll be a complete street cross-section. As I mentioned, it'll be 2 travel lanes in each direction. It will include intersection improvements and a multi-use path. This IGA is between Arapahoe County and the City of Aurora. So the grant that we received was through Dr. Cog. It was the TIP grant, and that amount was for $1.5 million. The grant will be administered by CDOT, and Arapahoe County is our partner on this project, and the City of Aurora will be managing the project, but will be working very closely with the county. The project costs, as I mentioned, Dr. Cog is providing us $1.5 million, which is 60% of the total project budget. City of Aurora has $500,000, and then Arapahoe County also has $500,000 for a total project budget of $2.5 million. As I mentioned, the CDOT IGA has been executed. So right now the project team is working on our scope of work, and we're getting ready to put this RFP out for us to start final design. And this is just part of the process, is to get the IGA executed with the county and the city. So my question before you is, does TAP support moving forward with the resolution and intergovernmental agreement between Arapahoe County and the city to the next available study session? And then I'm happy to answer any questions.
Council members, do you have any questions at this time?
No questions.
Wonderful.
Councilmember Bergan? Well, seeing none, we do support moving forward to the next available study session.
Very good. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. Finally, do we have any miscellaneous matters for consideration? Any anticipated? No, none, nothing, Cindy?
No miscellaneous matters.
Man, I
But
was hoping you'd
Ryan
say
can
yes.
cover the next topic.
Ryan?
Oh yeah, so the next meeting, so our August meeting, we have a handful of IGAs actually on the agenda. So there's one with Vista Peak, or with Aurora Public Schools actually, for a turn lane construction or turn island construction at Vista Peak High School. Then we have one for traffic signal construction at Piccadilly and Plains. Then we have 2 intergovernmental agreements with CDOT for some grant funding through the Regional Transportation Operations grant. So those are traffic signal related grant program. And then the last topic will be micro trenching. So I think we had a conversation about having a micro trenching presentation, and that is planned to be on the agenda for next month.
I'm
And
excited
Ryan-
about the micro trenching.
Counselor Hancock, if I can add, we'll also have one additional presentation from our ADA coordinator, Carlin Shorb, on the transition plan to this group and our focus on public right of way.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Thank you everyone for joining the call today. I really appreciate it. And thank you, Councilmember Bergan, for taking on the chair position in my delay today. Our next meeting is when? Next month, same bat time, same bat channel. And I always forget to look at the date. Laura, do you know?
Is August
Yes.
15th.
Thank you, Cindy.
August
Yep.
15th. Thank you so much. So
You're
we will
welcome.
be here, same bat time, same bat channel on August 15th. And try to stay cool, everybody. It's supposed to be 100 degrees this weekend. Woo! So thank you very much for joining. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.